7 players. That's all of the first overall picks that have gone on to win that year's Rookie of the Year award since 2000. So with all of the hype that's been spent around Cooper Flagg, fans and front offices shouldn't get complacent in thinking that there won't be any other diamond in the rough players that are going to come out of this draft as well. And so, despite the levels of greed coming from the Spurs fan base that would make Walter White look like a chill, humble guy, their front office could have an eye on another player. Risks like these are what separate the good drafting teams from the truly great ones. So in preparation for the upcoming 2025 NBA draft, why don't we look back on the past 24 seasons to see who's had the best track record when it comes to the draft. This is largely a subjective topic, so the way I'll be doing this is simply looking back at every draft pick taken by each team since the year 2000. I've created a point system that I'll use to tally up and somewhat get a feel on how well that draft pick has been able to pay dividends back to the franchise. Each All-Star selection equals 1 point, each All-NBA or All-Defensive selection will get you 2 points, MVPs, Defensive Player of the Years, and Rookie of the Years will get you 3 points, each championship with the team that drafted you will get you 4 points, and being the finals MVP for that championship will get you an extra 5 points. Now, for any player that is selected outside of the top 5, they'll receive 1 extra point per category that they qualify for. So, for example, Jokic's 7 All-Star selections would be worth 8 points, compared to Joel Embiid's 7 All-Star appearances that would only give Philly 7 points. The last few rules are that a player must have averaged at least 15 minutes to qualify for that category, finished their rookie contract, or at least played 4 seasons with the team. And finally, if a player gets traded on draft day, I'm counting the team that traded for him as a draft. For example, with Luka Doncic and Trae Young, I'm not putting Trae on the Mavs, and I'm not putting Luka on the Hawks, although they technically drafted each of those players. And with that out of the way, let's get right into the video. Starting things off, we have the New York Knicks and their lowly 1 single point coming from Kristaps Porzingis. The Nets are a little better off, but not by much. At 24, the Kings up the mark a bit with 13 points thanks to De'Aaron Fox, Boogie Cousins, and the Rookie of the Year win from Tyreke Evans. Tied at 23 with 14 points is the Hornets and the Wizards. At 22 with 17 points, we have the Atlanta Hawks. At 21 with 20 points is the Rockets, being heavily lifted up by Yao Ming, and considering the fact that his career was cut far shorter than it should have been, it's pretty impressive how many accolades he was able to stack up over his time in the NBA. And this is really why most people consider Yao to be one of the bigger what-if stories in the NBA. Tied with the Rockets at 21 is the Mavericks. However, unlike Yao with the Rockets, Luka's points end here not because of injuries, but because of the worst GM in NBA history, Nico Harrison. At 20 is the Pistons, and if this list was done in another 5 to 7 years, Cade alone could easily lift this squad up higher than their current position, but as his career stands, this is where the Pistons land. At 19, you have the Pacers with 26 points, and tied at 18 with 27 points, you have both the Memphis Grizzlies and the Minnesota Timberwolves. Similarly to the Pistons, Anthony Edwards, given another 5 to 7 years, could also lift the Timberwolves higher up on this list, as his full value and potential is far from being reached. Here at 17, we have the Clippers heavily being brought up by the Lob City days. At 16 is the Suns with 32 points, at 15 is the Lakers with 38 points, and sadly with Kobe's draft year being 4 years before the start of this list, you're missing out on a heavy hitter. But this list still does consist of a couple players from their back-to-back wins in 2009 and 2010. However, both Sasha and Luke Walton didn't hit the minutes qualifier for the second back-to-back, and so they didn't get rewarded for both championship wins with the team. At 14, you have the Orlando Magic with 45. The Pelicans are at 13, with their biggest heavy hitters being Anthony Davis and Chris Paul. I would like to say that Zion eventually would help contribute more to this list, but unlike Zion, I'm gonna show some restraint and not go that far. Tied at 12, we have the Trailblazers and the Toronto Raptors. The Raptors consist of quite a few players from that 2019 championship team, with the addition of Scottie Barnes, DeMar DeRozan, and Chris Bosh. This list doesn't include players that went undrafted, but if it did, you'd be able to add Fred VanVleet to this list as well, a true representation of how well the Raptors and Masai Ujiri are at finding hidden gems. At 11, with 49 points, you have the Chicago Bulls. And now cracking into the top 10, we have the Utah Jazz. Rudy Gobert really boosts this squad up, and while creating this video, it gave me a new understanding for why people say Rudy is so overrated. Speaking of overrated, we have Joel Embiid and the 76ers at 9. At number 8, we have the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Cavs have done a pretty solid job throughout the draft in the past couple of decades, adding championship pieces like Tristan Thompson, as well as bringing in your current future with Darius Garland and Evan Mobley. Oh, and drafting LeBron James kind of helps. But unfortunately for them, only his first stint with the team is included, because you can't really say that the Cavs expected him to leave and then come back when they selected him in the draft. Now we have the OKC Thunder at 7 with 64 points. But if this list also included how well they've been able to position themselves for future drafts, then Presti and the Thunder would definitely be at the very top of this list. I mean, there's a solid chance that they could win the championship this year and still could end up with a first overall pick in a couple of years, as they hold some pretty valuable draft picks. At number 6 with 65 points is the Milwaukee Bucks. The Bucks get a pretty heavy boost for snagging up a one-time Defensive Player of the Year, a two-time MVP, a Finals MVP, and a championship winner. And selecting him at 13 also gives them a +1 boost in every category. At number 6 with 69 points is the Denver Nuggets, who similarly get a benefit from drafting their star player during a Taco Bell commercial. But without the defensive accolades that Giannis has been able to stack up, Jokic's total score isn't as high. But with Carmelo Anthony starting off his career in Denver, they ultimately get the upper hand over the Bucks. And now we've got the Miami Heat at number 4. And really, you can just thank Dwayne Wade for this one. As a 3-time NBA champ, a Finals MVP, and a 13-time All-Star, all with the same team, I think it's fair to say that that draft pick has paid itself back multiple times over. And now we start off the top 3 with the Boston Celtics. A lot of these players were either a part of their 2008 championship team or their championship team last year, but most notably is probably Rajon Rondo. Coming into the NBA as the 21st overall pick, I don't think many people suspected that he would be a major piece for a championship core, a 4-time All-Star, and a guy who would lead the NBA in assists for 3 different seasons. At number 2, we have the San Antonio Spurs. This list doesn't even include both generational first overall picks in David Robinson and Tim Duncan. And still, they were able to charge their way all the way up to number 2. So to any Spurs fans that are hoping to also land Cooper Flagg, rewind the video to the Knicks, Wizards, or Nets and try to understand how y'all are displaying biblical levels of greed. And finally, your number 1 team, far ahead of everyone else with 167 points, is the Golden State Warriors. Although both the Spurs and Warriors have had their stints of dynasty years, the Warriors drafted all of their main stars before the year 2000. Obviously, you got both Draymond Green and Klay Thompson holding it down. But then you see Steph Curry and you realize how well the Warriors hit during that 2009 draft. There's been fewer loyal players since or even before then, let alone a guy who's been able to bring so much more to the franchise aside from that loyalty. Some people might not like that the Warriors are this high up based on the strength of those championship years, but you really can't argue that those draft picks spent on each of those players have paid off better than every single other player on this list. Obviously, this isn't an exact science. There are a lot more nuances that go into drafting. As I said with the Thunder, if you add in future draft picks, they're probably the winner for how well they've been able to position themselves for the future. And really how well they've been able to construct their current team, as this list doesn't factor in future potential of players either. But that's the list, so hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you back here for the next one.